I told myself I could sit through a wedding weekend without flinching if I kept my shoulders low and my mouth mostly shut. But I didn't plan on my father tapping a water glass with a knife and laughing into a microphone about the night he kicked me out 17 years ago like it was a charming origin story. I still remember the shape of his palm on the front door, the sting of cold air on my cheeks, the weight of a garbage bag full of jeans and high school t-shirts that smelled like our dryer. He called it tough love back then. At my brother's rehearsal dinner, he called it launching a kid who needed a little push, and the room actually chuckled until the bride looked at me, then at him, and smiled in a way that wasn't friendly or scared. More like she had been waiting her turn. The first Monday of the month, the local news in Toledo ran a cheerful piece about the Mommy Library book sale and the homecoming parade route, then a cooler front moving in over Lake Erie. I watched while I steamed a pale green dress I'd ordered on sale, a color my sister-in-law-to-be picked for the rehearsal, because the venue had brick walls, and she liked how sage looked against clay. My apartment smelled like hot water and lemon spray. I had been steady for months, grading freshman writing at the community college and counting dollars for my mortgage and my dad's old habit of showing up in rooms where my name lived only in other people's mouths had been quiet. I was 35 and proud in small ways that sound silly when you stack them next to wedding speeches. A car paid off in April, an emergency fund that could cover a broken water heater without a sob. 2 tomato plants still alive on the balcony even though fall tried to bully them. My brother Evan, 3 years younger and hard to dislike even when he repeats Dad's phrases like it's a language he can't stop speaking, was getting married on the second Saturday of the month. I circled the dates on a paper calendar because the phone's squares make time look too slippery to hold. On Tuesday after work, I drove the 20 miles to my parents' house in Perrysburg because my mother had a few last-minute details, which in our family means errands wrapped in guilt and a plate of cookies you don't want but take anyway. The ranch smelled like lemon oil and roast beef. My father had the baseball game on low, announcers humming about pitch counts and late-season fatigue, and he waved at me without taking his eyes off the screen. Mom slid a garment bag toward me with Evan's fiancé's name written in chalk on a wooden tag. "Can you drop this at the alterations place on your way home?" she asked, not looking up, and please don't be late Saturday. Pastor Paul is particular about aisle timing. I nodded because that's what I do when I want the ground to stay under me. "I'm not in the processional," I said. "I'll be in row 4 with the cousins." "Row 3, she corrected, not really listening, then added, "You'll want to keep your remarks short at the rehearsal. We read them for flow." "Remarks," I said. I wasn't planning to speak. "Good," she said, like she'd taught me something. We ate at the dining room table even though football would have made more sense in front of the TV, and my father asked if I was still grading papers for a living, the way he always asks. "A lot of kids get to stick with school because people like me push their paperwork through," I said lightly. "You do the math." He smiled the smile he uses when the conversation is a sport. "Some people learn by doing," he said. "Remember when you left at 18 and figured it out?" The fork felt slick in my hand. "I remember you telling me I was a problem you'd solved," I said. My mother passed the rolls like the room needed carbs. "It's history," she said. "Don't make tonight difficult." The second Wednesday of the month, I stopped by the alteration shop with the dress bag and a receipt and the kind of voice you use when you pretend everything is smooth. The seamstress, Marta, wrote the pickup time on a tiny claim tag and asked if I wanted to check the hem for dust. "We're all good," I said. Outside, the air had that bite it gets when the season changes, even though your coat is still at the back of the closet. Evan called on my drive home and put me on speaker because he was painting the new place they rented in Sylvania with one of his groomsmen. "Don't let Dad get to you," he said, as if talking about weather. "He thinks teasing is bonding." "He thinks control is care," I said. There was a pause. Then the bride, Hannah, shouted from the background, "Tell your sister I found extra grandparent seats. No one is standing in the back." And the cake flavor debate is over. Lemon wins. I laughed and yelled back that lemon is who I want to be when I grow up, then felt better for 5 minutes like a normal big sister who picks shoes and texts heart emojis and brings a real gift instead of a check. On Friday, the rehearsal dinner sat in the stomach of a downtown Toledo restaurant that makes mason jars look sophisticated. Brick walls, strings of lights, chalkboard menus with misspelled mushrooms. I wore the pale green dress and a cardigan because chairs near air vents always find me. The host ushered us to a long table with place cards written in Hannah's neat hand, and I was between our Aunt Carol and an empty chair labeled Dad. The menu was set: roast chicken, a salad with pumpkin seeds, little rolls that didn't need butter but got it anyway. People clinked glasses, someone prayed with a tone that wanted to be casual but couldn't shake church, and the server brought sweet tea to my father even though he hadn't asked. I saw my name on a small program for the next day, and under toasts it said Father of the Groom, Maid of Honor, Best Man, Bride, and then the line Family Reflections. There was a footnote: please keep reflections to 2 minutes. Avoid inside jokes that require context. I slid the card back under my plate because 2 minutes wouldn't fix a 17-year timeline, and I've learned that refusing assignments dressed as Grace is its own kind of boundary. The restaurant lights made everything a little amber, and the noise had that smooth hum you get when people have just enough to drink to think they're charming, but not enough to fall off chairs. My father tapped his knife on his glass and stood. The room quieted that way rooms do around microphones even when they're just water glasses. He smiled, made a joke about being outnumbered by people under 30, then said he wanted to talk about life lessons. My stomach tightened like it had practiced. When my daughter was 18, he began, and my hand went cold around my napkin. I showed her tough love, and she turned into the independent woman she is today. We laugh about it now. He chuckled. You're welcome, kiddo. The room smiled the way rooms smile when they don't know which face to wear. I did not smile. My throat felt dry in that burning way. I placed my napkin next to my plate like I was setting down something heavy very carefully. Hannah was watching him, then me, like a referee in a youth game who knows someone will start crying soon and it might be her. I wasn't going to speak. I wasn't going to say a word. But when the server moved past me with a tray of chicken and mashed potatoes, and my father leaned to the mic that wasn't and said, "She thanks me, don't you, sweetheart?" I heard my voice before I knew I was moving. I learned a lot at 18, I said, my voice steady enough to surprise me. Mostly that warmth isn't something you beg from a door. But we're here for Evan and Hannah, and I'm choosing lemon cake and the playlist we made in the car. A small laugh loosened around the table like a knot. My father smirked in that way he's had since I was too young to understand that smirking can be a weather pattern. "See," he said. "She's tough." He sat. I could feel my shoulders even though I wanted not to. After dinner, as people wandered toward the little patio where they'd strung more lights like someone was paid by the bulb, Hannah pulled me by the sleeve into the empty side room where they store high chairs and coolers. The room smelled like plastic and lemon oil. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her hand cool on my forearm. I told him no war stories. He thinks suffering is good television. I looked at her and saw the way her jaw set when she was trying not to make me carry her shame. "It's old," I said. "I have new furniture." She made a small huff that was almost a laugh and then said, "I need you to hear something now, before tomorrow, so you have time to decide how you want to stand." She pulled her phone from the little beaded bag she'd borrowed from her aunt and scrolled, then held up a photo, a scanned letter on creamy paper, my father's handwriting unmistakable, blocky, neat the salutation, "To whom it may concern," then the sentence, "I release claim to the Wilkins Education Fund," dated the year after I left. My stomach did that roller coaster drop again. "How did you get that?" I asked. The tip of her nose had gone pink. "My uncle is with the credit union that serviced the church trusts. I asked for documents for the house down payment gift your dad promised us," she said, eyes on my face, and he found this in the archive. The education fund was originally for both children. It was closed in the same quarter a new car was purchased in his name. I shouldn't have it, but now we both do. The air felt thick. I remembered the way my mother said we couldn't pull tuition from thin air and how I took an extra shift at the grocery store 20 minutes from campus because the bus ran late and I could grade in the break room between stocking shelves. I remembered the Christmas the car appeared and the way Dad patted the hood like a dog. "Don't say anything yet," Hannah said, hand still on my arm. "Just know it's there. I wanted you to have a copy before you decide how you want tomorrow to go. If you want me to keep it in my pocket and pretend I never saw it, I can do that. If you want me to use my microphone, I can do that too." Her voice didn't shake. Mine might have if I'd tried to speak, so I didn't. I took the phone and forwarded the photo to myself, my fingers clumsy on the tiny keyboard. I sent it twice because sending something twice feels like control when you don't have any. We walked back out and pretended nothing had happened because I refused to let a printed menu know what I'm feeling. My father had cornered the best man with a story about cutting lawns in the summer heat to make a man out of a boy, and my mother was telling Aunt Carol that the centerpieces would look even better in real lighting, which Aunt Carol agreed with because she memorizes scripts and doesn't deviate. Evan danced with Hannah by the speakers, a quiet sway in shoes that were a half size too big because he'd borrowed them from Jason the groomsman and wouldn't admit it. I watched them and thought about how choices look small in rooms where food is warm, then felt my phone buzz in my cardigan pocket. A message from a number I didn't know. "This is Pete from the credit union. Hannah asked me to send the whole packet. Check your email." I opened my inbox and there it was, Education Fund Disposition, a PDF with numbers and dates and the last little line that tells you where everything went. The next morning, first Saturday of the month, I woke up before my alarm because my brain wanted something down on paper before the rest of me broke routine. The apartment was quiet except for the fridge humming and a neighbor's shower running 2 walls over. I made coffee that tasted like it always does, slightly burnt and reliable, and I printed the packet. The printer made that steady chug and cough it does when it hasn't been used for more than a syllabus. I read it with a pen in my hand like I was grading a report I couldn't fail. The numbers were not huge, but they would have covered community college tuition for 2 years with enough left for gas and books. The fund had been split once, then reallocated, the memo line on the final transfer labeled Vehicle Purchase and Home Improvements. I put the papers in a manila folder because I am the kind of person who needs a folder to breathe. I wrote October receipts on the tab. My hands felt cool again, steady. That steadiness is my favorite feeling. At 10 I drove to the church for the final walkthrough in the fellowship hall because Hannah had sent a note asking family who can to come early to help with place cards and to check the sound on the laptop for the slideshow. My father was already there in his suit pants and a white undershirt because he sweats when he's in charge, fanning himself with a program and telling the DJ to make sure the mic has some bite. I nodded to him like he was a neighbor and not my history. He nodded back like I was an item on a checklist. We wrapped twine around mason jars because that's what the internet says to do. The florist's assistant brought in buckets that smelled like damp cardboard and green stems. The DJ tested the mic with check, 1, 2, and Hannah asked if he had a second handheld for the toasts. "We can make do with one," my father said. "We toss it back and forth." She smiled politely and said, "We'll use 2. He went quiet, which is its own kind of music. Later, in the church hallway where bulletin boards hold 10 years of bake sale flyers and mission trip photos, where everyone looks sunburned and proud, My mother cornered me with a neat envelope and a soft voice. "Can we be kind today?" she asked, as if she were offering a cookie. "Can we not make your father feel small on his son's special day?" "I can be silent," I said. "That's not the same thing," she replied. "You make silence sound like a threat." I stared at the stapler on the church office desk, like it was a landmark I could use to get out. "I'm not here for him," I said. "I'm here for Hannah and Evan. I won't take the mic. But I won't lend him my face while he edits my story." She pressed her lips into a thoughtful line like people do when they want to look fair, then handed me the envelope. "Your father wrote something for you," she said. "Maybe read it and see if this can be our truce." I slipped the note into my bag without looking. I didn't trust my throat. By afternoon, I was back at my apartment because I needed 20 minutes of quiet to press my dress and not think about the numbers under vehicle purchase. Baseball murmured from the TV, postseason highlights, and a segment about a pitcher's rehab, the kind of filler that feels like company when you don't want a person. I opened my bag and took out my father's envelope. Inside was a typed page, formal font, no greeting. "Family is not a bank," it began, which was a choice, then a paragraph about forgiveness and moving forward, and what's said at a microphone shouldn't matter if we know who we are, and my shoulders went up again, then down, because I didn't have the energy to hold them there. I folded the letter back into the envelope and tucked it under the printer. I picked up the manila folder instead. It was heavier. At 5:30, guests started to fill the rows and the sanctuary smelled like flowers and that church wax that lives on polished wooden pews. The bridesmaids lined up. Evan bounced on his heels. Hannah's father blinked too much. My father adjusted his tie and cleared his throat twice the way he does when he's about to keep a promise to himself at someone else's expense. I stood in row 3, left side, and watched the light from the stained glass settle on people's shoulders like the day had remembered us. The processional music began. The day decided to move forward whether or not I felt ready. The manila folder was in my bag under my seat. My hands were steady. And right before the doors opened for Hannah, she glanced back at me from the edge of the aisle, met my eyes, and nodded once, slow, like the way you nod at a friend before you lift a box. "You okay?" I whispered when she got close enough, and her smile was small and exact. "I am," she said, and her voice had more steel than lace. "If he goes there tonight, I've got something to say." I didn't know then that she meant it exactly the way it sounded. I only knew that the folder under my seat hummed in my head like a power source I didn't have to use unless someone tried to turn out the lights. Part 2. American Family Vengeance Writer. 30s. The ceremony itself was clean and bright, the kind of short service that leaves room for the reception to hold the stories people want to tell later. Hannah's uncle read 2 simple paragraphs about choosing each other every day when laundry is late and traffic is loud. Evan's voice shook on his vow long enough to make half the room tilt its head. I kept my breathing steady and fixed my eyes on a stained glass blue that always calms me. When the pastor said the words and the music started and they walked back down the aisle with the kind of smile you only get in rooms like that, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time since Friday. Outside, the air had that crisp Northwest Ohio bite. The parking lot was a field of shiny cars and church shoes. The photographer herded us into family shapes on the steps. Parents, siblings, grandparents, she called, the efficient tone of someone who has learned to wrangle polite chaos. I stepped in on Evan's left because that's where I've always stood since he was 5 and insisted that by my elbow was the safest place in any room. My father angled his body just enough to put his shoulder between me and the frame. "Just the core," he said to the photographer, like I was a +1 who'd missed the email. My mouth went dry, the way it did when I was 18 and someone else decided my status for me. The photographer looked at Hannah, and Hannah looked at me, and then she reached for my hand and pulled me into the center like she was adjusting a vase on a shelf. This is the core, she said evenly. If I'm family, she's family, and I'm married into both at the same time. My father smiled with his teeth, the way he does right before he says something that will leave a bruise, and then calls it a lesson. He didn't get a chance. The photographer counted down and snapped 3 fast frames, and in all 3 my jaw is set, but my eyes are calm because I decided in that second to pick calm like a jersey. At the reception hall 8 miles from the church, the staff had done that reliable Midwest magic where a room with foldable walls becomes a place you don't have to apologize for. Twinkle lights ran along beams. A slideshow looped over a rented screen with baby pictures and fishing trips and Hannah at a high school track meet where the sky looks too big. I set my purse under the table and slid my folder next to it like it weighed the same as a wrap, and I let myself have 1 minute where the lemon cream cake on its stand made me forget I didn't get lemon at my own wedding because I didn't get a wedding. I got a courthouse and a pizza and 2 years I don't talk about much. Evan and Hannah did their first dance to a song that made the older cousins nod and the younger cousins pull their phones out. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin like she'd been assigned a role and wanted extra credit. The DJ invited us to sit for toasts. The program said father of the groom first. My stomach tightened like a reflex. My father stood, smoothed his tie, and held the microphone close enough that his breath made a soft pop. He started fine, thanks to the staff, a nod to Hannah's parents for raising a good one, a joke about Evan's high school haircut. Then he tipped into what he always thinks is charm. Families aren't perfect, he said, glancing at me as if I were a bulletin board pinned with his examples, and sometimes we do what we have to do to make kids launch. When my daughter was 18, we had our moment, and look at her now, a homeowner with tomato plants and a job where she can alphabetize for a living. He smiled like that sentence was safe. There was a ripple of laughter because people in big rooms take cues from microphones. My fork felt slick in my hand again. I set it down. He leaned in for his favorite part. I always say a good shove is better than a padded room, and I think it's worked out for all of us, hasn't it, kiddo? The room gave him a small, obedient chuckle. He added, "You're welcome," and the word did a slow circle under the ceiling and came back to sit on my plate. I didn't stand. I didn't raise my hand. But I caught Hannah's face across the table as she reached for the second microphone the DJ had set aside earlier and tapped it lightly. "Can I follow that?" she said, smiling at the room with her teacher voice, the kind that can quiet a gym without making it feel scolded. I want to thank our parents for everything they did to get us here, and I also want to say a sentence I believe in as much as my new last name. We don't build new families by rewriting old stories for applause. We build them by telling the truth in a way we can live with. She looked at me then, not long, just enough. When I was going through paperwork for our house, I learned something about an education fund that used to exist for both kids in this family. It was closed the year after one of those kids left home. That's not a speech, that's a date on a page. We don't need to litigate it tonight. She let that hang just long enough for people to understand it was real, and then added in that same calm voice, "What we can do is make a new sentence out loud. Evan and I are setting aside the first $1,000 from gifts to start a small scholarship that helps a kid at the community college stay on track with books and bus fare, because paperwork keeps people in classrooms, and not everyone has someone to push the right form across the right desk." That's how I want our toasts to age. The room with that quiet you get before a storm decides whether to cross your fence. My father said, "This is not appropriate," the first words he has said from a low place in front of more than 5 people in years, and he reached for the mic with a small, quick motion like he was taking back the remote. The DJ did the smart thing and lowered the volume just enough that voices went soft. Evan stood, one hand on Hannah's shoulder, the other palm up, a signal you give a skittish dog. "We're good," he said into his own mic, and he used his calm voice too. the one he had as a camp counselor, the one that always worked on groups of boys who wanted to throw forks. "Dad, we're doing our version now." My mother set her napkin down like it was heavy and didn't look at me. Aunt Carol looked at her lap. Then the room did what rooms do when someone with a steady voice hands them a better path. People clapped, not the nervous kind, the relieved kind, and the best man stood and told a story about Evan's first apartment and a couch carried up 3 flights of stairs, and the maid of honor cried in the funny way and made everyone like her more. I breathed again. My father kept his face smooth and his jaw tight, and he pulled a paper from his jacket pocket and slid it toward my mother. I didn't have to be a lip reader to know he said, "Your turn," and my mother shook her head once, sharp, and said, "No." After the toasts, when salad plates were cleared and the line at the bar didn't look like a parade, my father cut across the dance floor and stopped at my chair. "That was uncalled for," he said in a voice so mild a stranger would think he was asking if I needed more water. "We don't need auditors at family events." I kept my hands on my lap because I didn't want to give him anything to read. "No one audited you," I said. A sentence told the truth about a date. He leaned closer so only I could hear it. "You always had a talent for making decent people look like villains," he said, eyes still smiling at a cousin across the way. "If you get up and say anything else, I will ask Pastor Paul to help you out." My chest did that tight thing again and then released because I had an answer that didn't require volume. "Pastor Paul officiated a wedding," I said. "He doesn't double as security." Also, I wasn't going to speak. He blinked, the smallest surprise, because he always thinks I'll reach for a sword. "You think you're better than us," he said, still pleasant. "No," I said. "I think I'm done being a prop." He straightened, patted my shoulder with 2 fingertips like I was a stray dog he was pretending to be friendly with, and drifted away. The DJ turned up a Motown song that always makes Aunt Carol dance like she remembers high school even if she won't admit it, and for 10 minutes the room warmed up to something like joy again. I let myself lean into a conversation with Hannah's cousin about mortgage points and whether you should buy down when rates are jumpy. I learned she sells houses part-time and has opinions about color on front doors that made me laugh. Rice pilaf came out, then chicken, then green beans in a sauce someone probably called garlicky in a meeting. The slideshow looped through baby pictures of me holding Evan like he belonged to me and graduation caps tossed in the far-off year when we both thought 25 was ancient. It could have ended there, with a thin layer of decency poured over a rough bottom, and I would have gone home and put my folder back in the drawer and marked the night down as one of the better ones, argument-wise. But the night decided to show me the rest of itself. Around 9, while people were loosening ties and slipping off heels and the little kids were melting down in a way that makes everyone feel human, the venue manager, short woman, sensible shoes, the calm of a person who has guided 100 families through 100 versions of themselves, came to our table with an apology already formed. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said, hands folded, "but I need to speak with the parties who opened the bar tab. There's a hold issue with a card." She looked at Evan, then at my father, then at me because I look like I will not break if spoken to. Evan stood, Hannah stood, my father stayed seated for half a beat too long, then popped up with a gracious, "Let me take care of it." I followed because I've learned that when money gets loud, facts get quiet unless someone writes them down. In the office near the kitchen, where the air smelled like coffee and dish soap and the buzz of a refrigerator motor made me feel like a child again in church basements, the manager laid out the situation without theatrics. "The card we have on file for the bar authorization didn't finalize," she said carefully. "It looks like a limit issue, not a decline, and we can split to another card or take a check if that's easier." She had the signed contract in a plastic sleeve. The signature looked like my father's, and the card number matched the last 4 on the back of a card I've seen him pick up the tab with at family dinners when the bill makes him feel like a king. "I'll write a check," he said, reaching for his jacket pocket like a magician reaching for a dove. "We don't take personal checks," the manager said kindly. "We can take a debit card or a different credit card." Hannah stepped forward. "We can cover it," she said, reaching for her purse. My father's jaw moved like he was chewing on a word he didn't want to swallow. "Absolutely not," he said. "It's my son's wedding." He pulled out a second card and handed it over with a flourish. The manager ran it. The small machine made a noise everyone in America knows. "It wasn't approved," she said, still calm. "No worries, we can split it, or you can call the number on the card and they can lift the ceiling." My father's ears went red. I felt that same old reflex: step in, smooth it, save the room, but I didn't move. Evan looked at me, then at Hannah. Hannah put her debit card on the desk and said, "We're splitting it, and we can settle with family later if that feels good to anyone." She was smiling, but not the kind that invites disagreement. The manager took the card, ran it, nodded, printed. She slid the receipt across the desk with a pen. "Sign here," she said to Hannah. My father stepped in as if he could block a car, and he put his hand over the paper. "This is ridiculous," he said. "Why does everything have to be a show with you people?" He looked at me when he said, "you people," and I saw in that second the line running from a closed fund to a closed tab, and it wasn't about the amount, it was about narrative. He liked being the man who paid. He did not like the math. "What exactly is the show?" I asked, because my voice had decided it was done filing corners. "The part where a card doesn't go through and we cover our own party and no one has to hear about it, or the part where you make the hall wait while you pretend this is about principle." The manager shifted one eye at me, a tiny flick of appreciation without taking sides. My father took his hand off the receipt. Hannah signed neatly, like a person who writes her name on dozens of papers for a living and knows the weight of it. The manager thanked us, made a note, and we walked back into the hallway where someone was dragging a cart stacked with coffee cups, and one of the kids cried near the bathroom because formal clothes itch. My mother intercepted us near the door to the hall with that thin smile that says she believes she can outlast whatever you brought her. "Is everything handled?" she asked my father, not breaking eye contact with him long enough to notice anyone else's existence. "It's fine," he said, the word tight. He turned to me with the sunny voice he uses when he wants an audience to think the scene is over. "You're good at paperwork," he said lightly. "Maybe next time we'll let you be useful." He took a half step past me. That was the moment, small, ordinary, nothing dramatic, that my plan moved from a manila folder in my bag to the part of my spine that makes you stand a little straighter even if your shoes aren't comfortable. I didn't pull out the documents and wave them. I didn't raise my voice. I stepped next to Hannah and said one line in a tone I knew the DJ's mic wouldn't pick up even if it were hot. "If you tell that shove story again tonight," I said, "I'll ask Hannah to read the letter about the fund, and I'll ask the manager to print the bar receipt with your name on the authorization and hers on the settlement. And we'll all go back to our chicken and green beans after the truth gets 10 seconds of air." My father blinked like the light had changed and he didn't know the new pattern. "You wouldn't," he said, no question mark. "I don't want to," I said. "I came to dance, eat cake, and help load centerpieces into trunks. But I won't be small for you in a room where you're trying to look big." He stared at me for a beat too long, then at Hannah, then at Evan, who didn't flinch. My mother opened her mouth to fill the air. Nothing came out. We went back into the hall. The DJ called for the bouquet toss. The cousins clustered, laughing. Someone's heel caught on a chair leg and 3 people reached out at once. The slideshow froze on a baby picture of Evan holding a plastic bat in the backyard while I clapped near the porch. I sat and took a sip of water and felt my heartbeat slow from hummingbird to normal. In the center of the table, the place cards leaned against small pumpkins someone had painted white. The wax from the votive candles made small soft circles on the runners like heat maps. The evening could still slide into a regular ending, I thought, the kind where people scrape plates and hug too hard, and someone leaves with a leftover roll wrapped in a napkin. Then the DJ tapped the mic and said, "Before we cut the cake, the father of the groom has one last quick word." I felt my spine go stiff out of habit. Hannah stood up before he got to the mic stand, took 2 steps, and put her hand on the bass like she was steadying a lamp in a moving truck. "Quick housekeeping note," she said, smiling straight at the room while not looking at my father at all. "Thank you for being kind tonight. Thank you for clapping at the right places. Before we slice cake, I want to say this so I don't think about it while I'm eating lemon. If you've ever been told your worst day made you strong and therefore owe someone else a thank you, you don't owe that thank you. You made yourself. People helped or they didn't. We're going to cut cake and dance and go home to our ordinary lives, and in those lives, please don't tell your kids that love looks like a shove. It looks like a ride to class when the bus is late and a check that clears when you promised it would." She winked at me in a way that made my throat tight and my eyes sting without spilling. The room laughed, the good kind this time, the relieved kind. The DJ said cake time, and my father, God bless him or not, sat down. He did not stand again. He did not raise a glass. He ate cake with the rest of us and pretended lemon wasn't making his jaw pucker. When we lined up to say goodbye with sparklers that refused to light because the air was damp and the cheap lighters had been purchased in bulk by someone who doesn't smoke and doesn't know, I hugged Hannah and whispered, "You didn't have to throw me that rope," and she whispered back, "You didn't have to put the rocks in your pockets all these years," and then she laughed like she knew she'd said it too poetically and fixed it. "I mean, thanks for staying. Most people wouldn't." Evan hugged me the way he did when we were kids and neighborhood games ran long in July and Mom stood on the porch with a dish towel and a bedtime we ignored. "I'm sorry," he said into my hair. "For then and for tonight and for next week when he tries to rewrite it again." I pulled back. "You and your wife did fine," I said. "I'll be at brunch tomorrow if anyone wants to ask me a history question." He smiled like he remembered I used to quiz him on state capitals for fun. At home, before I stepped out of my shoes, I put the folder on my kitchen table and slid the bar receipt inside with the letter and the fund paperwork and wrote a new word on the tab next to October receipts. I added wedding. I poured myself a glass of water and drank half of it standing up. The local 8 News ran a piece about a lost dog from 2 towns over who found his way home, and a quick sports hit about post-season predictions that had no bearing on my life and still made me feel held. I texted Hannah a row of lemon emojis because she earned them. Then my phone buzzed with a number I recognized but didn't label my father's. The preview said only "We need to talk." I plugged my phone into the charger and turned it face down. I knew the talk would come. I knew he would try to frame it in a hallway where his voice would sound like history to anyone walking past. And I knew, for the first time in a long time, that I had more than one way to stand in that hallway without dropping my shoulders. Part 3. American Family Vengeance Writer. 39s. Sunday morning I woke before my alarm because my phone on the nightstand pulsed with that cool, even light it uses for messages that want to act like emergencies. My father had texted at 12:41 a.m. "We need to talk," followed by nothing, which is his favorite kind of pressure. The local news was already running in the background, high school highlights from Whitmer's homecoming game, a cheerful anchor at the flea market out by the fairgrounds holding up a cast iron skillet like it was a trophy, a gray block of weather over Lake Erie. I stood in my kitchen in socks and ate a banana over the sink, then set the folder on the counter and stared at it until the heat from the coffee cup stopped feeling hot in my hand. Hannah had sent a short message at dawn, brunch at 11, open house style, no speeches, Come if you want to sit where the light is good. I wrote back, I'll come. I'm not mad at pancakes. At 10:45, I parked on Adams Street and walked into a diner that has served the same menu since the Tigers were last interesting, and the hostess smiled in that way people in Midwestern diners do when they recognize a face they don't actually know. The air smelled like coffee and syrup and the faint sour of a mop bucket that wasn't rinsed long enough. Hannah and Evan were in a corner booth with two cousins and Hannah's old track coach, who was telling a story about bus seats and bagel stops. I slid in next to my brother and my shoulders did their small drop. 10 minutes later, my parents came in, my mother scanning the room like she was walking minefields, my father in a windbreaker zipped halfway like casual was a costume. He looked at me and then looked away because he likes to direct the first scene and I wasn't giving him a cue. The hostess put them 2 tables down because the room was already full of grandparents and kids in stiff shoes and one aunt wearing a hat that made her put her chin up so it wouldn't fall. I was halfway through my eggs, dry, salted, exactly how I like them, when my father stood next to the end of our booth and cleared his throat like a small mic check. Can I steal my kids for a second? He said to the table, charming to the room, hands palms up like he could carry us with those. Evan slid out. I slid after, because my rule with men like my father is you don't leave your brother alone with phrasing. Hannah stood as well and tucked her hand into Evan's elbow with the tenderness of a person who knows which arm to hold when you're bracing. My father led us to the vestibule by the pie case where the glass fogs when someone opens the outer door and the whole room can still see you pretend you're private. He smiled like a sponsor. Last night was a spectacle, he said in a voice that was all measured cotton. You turned a toast into an indictment. I would like a public correction before folks settle on the wrong version. I want you, he looked at me, to say that the fun business was a misunderstanding and that you appreciate the tough love that made you who you are. People need tidy endings. I kept my hands flat against my thighs because otherwise I touch my face, and he reads that as weakness. I'm not your tidy ending, I said. I'm a person who moved out with a garbage bag and stocked cereal in a grocery at midnight and learned to keep a folder. I'm not standing in a diner to call a document a misunderstanding. Hannah's mouth turned up at one corner, not a smile, something closer to agreement. Evan worked his jaw like a man trying not to say 3 things at once and then decided to say only one. Dad, he said, quiet and steady, we're done telling her story like it's your credit score. My father's eyes didn't leave my face. This is disrespect, he said. This is what happens when a family lets hurt feelings run the books. Hannah put both hands on the chrome edge of the pie case like it was a lectern at a school board meeting. If hurt feelings is your term for the day, she said, calm, then call mine this. I won't have you teach the kids we'll have that love looks like a shove and paperwork is petty. We're not revisiting last night with microphones or pie. We're eating brunch. You're welcome to sit and eat. You're not welcome to perform. He laughed the way a man laughs when he wants the room to think he's above laughter. You're all very theatrical for people who claim you hate theater, he said. Lauren, if you were any kind of decent daughter, you'd let this go. You'd say, we're fine and we'd all be fine. I didn't look at the folder because I didn't bring it in. It was in the car like a choice I didn't have to make yet. Here's my sentence, I said. If you bring up the shove story again in any room I am in, I'll email the packet from the credit union to everyone who hears it. If you don't, I won't. I want pancakes and a Sunday nap. You get to choose which story stays in the room. He stared at me the way he stares at the TV when a call goes against his team and he decides the umpires are cosplaying. That's blackmail, he said. That's a boundary, Hannah said, clean as a bell, and she had both of our eyes for a second like she was the only person who could see the line drawn on the tile. We went back to our booths. The server refreshed coffee and slid over a small dish of butter pats like extra kindness, and my phone buzzed with a text from Aunt Carol in all caps, which she thinks makes her look sure. Don't fight at brunch. Save it for later. I put my phone face down because sometimes the most adult thing you can do is have pancakes in front of you and not turn them into a metaphor. We ate. We paid our checks separately, which is a small act that feels bigger in certain families. My father and mother left without hugging anyone, which the room noticed because rooms notice absences as loudly as they notice speeches. Evan and Hannah walked me to my car, and Hannah leaned against my door and said, if he goes quiet for 3 days, he's loading a new story. If he calls in an hour, he's trying to keep you from writing your own. Prepare for either. I laughed because she was right and because I like people who know how weather works. Monday was the first day in 2 weeks my desk at the college felt like a desk and not a staging area. I answered an email from a student about scheduling a May-up test, printed 3 accommodation letters, and drew a small star next to midterm grid due Friday because I use paper for the same reason some people use vitamins. At lunch, I went outside with my carrot sticks and a granola bar I didn't want and sat on a concrete bench where the campus radio station always plays something from a decade ago that makes me feel older than I am and kinder than I think I can be. My phone buzzed with an unknown number, and I didn't answer because the message would tell me if it needed me. It did. This is Pete from the credit union. The system shows access to that old fund was authorized by a church trustee. If you need a line for a letter, I can send you the generic language they use when families repurpose accounts. I texted back, send the generic language. I'm writing a thank you note to the people who gave me college, me and 3 managers at Kroger and whoever invented community college. He sent the line and an emoji that looked like a shrug because bankers are human. By Tuesday after PTA night at the college, our version is Parent Info Hour, but the vibe is the same, coffee and styrofoam and questions about deadlines. I had drafted the thing that was beginning to look like my revenge even though it didn't use that word once. I asked Hannah to look at it first, then Evan, because they understand when to trim their fur and when to leave because alone. The plan was as simple as a $15 checkbook and less satisfying to argue with. I would set up the scholarship she'd spoken about, a tiny books and bus fare award at the college, administered by the foundation office with receipts required, name it. The backdoor scholarship, because I wanted the title to be a joke only to me, and seed it with the first 1,000 from wedding gifts they insisted on splitting with me even though I tried to say no. I would send a short letter to the relatives who heard the speeches, saying thank you for clapping at the right places. Here's where the money went. Here's the link if you want to add $25 in honor of the kid you know who kept going. Nowhere in the letter would the word fund appear next to a year or a car. It would be an invitation, not a trial. The trial would always be between me and my kitchen table at midnight with a folder. Wednesday evening my father called while I was halfway through chopping onions and the game on TV was in that lull before first pitch when the announcers talk about weather like they trained as pilots. He didn't leave a message. He called again. On the 3rd call I answered because ignoring him is gasoline. He said he wanted to meet someplace neutral, which is manspeak for, I will try to make the room yours so I can tell you it's mine. I picked the public library in Mommy because books hush people who can't be hushed at home and because a librarian will look over her glasses at anyone who raises a voice in a carpeted space. He arrived 15 minutes late and sat across from me at a table with a sign that said, Quiet Study. He didn't take off his coat. I talked to Pastor Paul, he said, getting straight to the part where he thinks he has a weapon. He says forgiveness is the only road forward. He says you're making an idol out of paperwork. I nodded because the thing about a sentence like that is it only hurts if you let it be a verdict. I like paper, I said. It remembers what people say when people forget. He leaned forward and lowered his voice like a coach who wants a kid to steal home when it isn't smart. I will make you a deal, he said. You stop this scholarship nonsense. You send a message to the wedding list that says you were mistaken about the fund. You show me some respect in front of my friends. In exchange, I'll help you with the house. You probably need a new roof. You can pick the shingles. My laugh came out wrong, a short bark that made a man at the next table look up over the top of a paperback. I don't need a roof from you, I said. I need to go to bed at night without deciding if the next time I see a microphone I should duck. The scholarship stays. The letter goes out Friday. You're not in it. He frowned in that specific way he frowns when he thinks he's been generous and you've spit in it. People will think I'm a bad father, he said. I'm okay with people thinking I made hard choices. I won't have them think I'm cheap. It was so precise and so small it almost made me more tired than angry. You're not cheap, I said. You're controlling. Sometimes those wear the same coat. He stood up a little too fast for a library. I should never have come, he said. You're not reasonable. I'm not reachable, I said. Not with this offer. He left, and the air in the library filled back in where he had been. On the last Thursday before payday, I emailed the letter. It was 3 paragraphs long and used no words I wouldn't say to a stranger at a bus stop. The college's foundation office sent me a short link and a form that made it clear this wasn't a slush fund for my feelings. It was a checkbox on a website that issued receipts and required a name. By noon, my Aunt Carol had replied, "So proud of you. We gave 50. Don't tell anyone because I hate drama," which is my favorite sentence she has ever written. By dinner, 2 of Hannah's track girls had chipped in $10 each, and one of my former students sent a longer message than the money warranted, which said in essence that sometimes the bus eats people whole and sometimes it spits them out where they meant to be. And either way, $5 can get you to a job. I didn't cry. I made a grilled cheese and watched a highlight reel and put the receipt in the folder because that's what I do when I want to sleep later. Friday afternoon, the foundation director called with the voice of a person who knows how to hide excitement under policy. She said the fund had reached $2,000 in 24 hours, and she had a stack of small notes that said, "For the kid who is almost out of gas." She asked if I wanted to put a single sentence on the fund page explaining why it exists. I wrote, "For anyone who was told a shove was love, this gets you to class," and then stared at the words for a long minute to make sure they didn't turn into a speech. I logged off, put my phone face down, and stood at my sink while the neighbor's dog barked twice at a squirrel and the late news teased a segment about a garage sale for band uniforms 2 miles from my block. I felt tired in the way you feel after raking leaves, weak in the arms, but sure you can sit on the stoop and drink water and not dread getting up again. My father did not call that night. He did not call Saturday or Sunday. On Monday after PDA, I saw him at the grocery store near the stadium in the soup aisle, staring at a shelf of broths the way men stare at things that should be simple and aren't. He saw me and didn't pretend he hadn't. "You've made me look small," he said without hello. "You did that," I said. "I just stopped letting you stand on my shoulders." He nodded once, a tight jerk of the chin, and then he surprised me enough to make me step back half an inch. "Your scholarship," he said, "if I gave to it, would you put my name on a plaque?" "There isn't a plaque," I said. "There's a line that says receipt emailed. Give if it helps a kid, not if it helps a wall." He grunted, which in our family means either fine or forget it. He put 2 cartons of stock in his cart and rolled away. The denouement arrived like a normal week. The Tigers played a series I only half-watched because the second innings were slow. The church bulletin noted 2 weddings, 1 baptism, and a thank you to all who gave to the community college book fund, without a name, which made me swallow once and breathe. Hannah texted me a photo of Evan building a wobbly bookshelf with a caption that said, "Who gave this man a drill?" And I wrote back, "The same person who gave me a folder." My mother sent a message that said, "I wish you would make less of things," and I did not reply because some messages are an RSVP to a party I have stopped attending. The foundation office emailed to say a student named Micah, who works nights at a warehouse by the highway, had received the first $200 voucher for books and bus fare and had written, "This takes the ache out for a week." I went very still in my kitchen because the ache in my body had been noisy for so many years I didn't realize it could go quiet, even for 7 days at a time. At the end of the month, I stood on my balcony with a sweater over a t-shirt and pinched the last tomato off the stubborn plant that had refused to quit and thought about 17 years like a month that had simply refused to pass. I pressed the tomato between my forefinger and thumb and felt the skin give like the moment a locked door opens on the second try because you had the right key the whole time and didn't trust your own hand. I made a small salad, watched another weather segment about a lake effect that might happen and might not, and wrote November quiet on a new tab because I liked how the previous one had looked in the file. The Revenge, if I had to name it for a camera or a thumbnail, did not explode. It just forced the room to stop applauding a shove and start funding a bus pass. Hannah and I still send each other lemon emojis when we have a day that bends the wrong way. Evan calls most Sundays and asks if I want to split a Costco pack of batteries because he thinks in practical units now. My father's name hasn't appeared on the donor report, but I don't check for it more than once a week. The folder stays in the drawer. The policy in my house is simple and written down. If someone tells the story for applause, I will tell the truth for free. If they keep quiet, I will eat cake and go home. That's enough of an ending for a month where the door finally opened and the room decided to keep the light on.